Hello and welcome to a Spectrum video this time. Now I'm going to be showing you how I'm going around fixing bugs in the compiler for the new version of Arcade Game Designer. Now as it stands, the instruction add AB to CD should take the 16-bit values in the A and B variables, add them to the C and D variables and put the answer back in the C and D variables. Unfortunately, what we're getting in the C and D variables at the moment is gibberish. So what we need to do is find out exactly what's going wrong, what code is being generated, and what needs to be done to fix it. Let's get into that now.
After peeking around in the Spectrum's memory, I discovered that this is the code that the compiler is producing when it encounters the text or the code add AB to CD. Now what it's doing here is it's getting the A and B variables in the HL register pair, then flipping that into the DE register pair. That's all very fine and dandy, but then it's doing the addition, adding AB to CD, and then putting it back into CD. The problem is that at this point we haven't picked up the variables C and D, so we're just adding variables A and B to whatever random nonsense we actually have in the HL register pair at that point. So the line that we're missing is this one. That's the line that we need to get the compiler to produce in that sequence of lines to add AB to CD. Then what it's doing at the start is putting variables A and B into the HL pair, flipping it into DE, then loading the HL pair with variables C and D, adding them to the A and B variables that we've got in D and E, and then putting it back in variables C and D, and that's the correct code. So it was this third line here that we weren't generating and that's missing. That's why add AB to CD doesn't work in the compiler. So with that in mind, we need to go back to the source code and the compiler and write some code to generate that line. So what we have here, first of all, is the code that gets called when we encounter the add instruction. First thing it does is this is actually used for add or subtract. So what it does is it's called with the operation type in the C register. So we store that in op type so that we know whether we're doing an addition or subtraction later. The next bit we do is we call the code to evaluate the expression that follows it, and in this case all it does is it finds the variable pair AB. So what that will do, EVEXP, is generate the code that loads HL with the contents of variables A and B. That's the first line you saw in the generated code. Next bit we do, that's the opcode. If you look in the back of the Spectrum manual for EXDE, HL, so that flips the HL register into DE. We want this variable in the DE pair, not in HL. That's not done by EVEXP. That's just a general routine that we call just to put the contents of the expression and evaluate that and get that all the code in there. So it doesn't know whether we want it in DE or HL. So that's why I have to flip it into DE later. Then we move the destination byte on, and then we continue. The next bit of code it encounters is the to instruction, and this is what we were doing. We were then taking the operation type, determining whether it was an addition or a subtraction, and doing the relevant code. So in this point it realized it was an addition, and it was jumping into here. The code for add HL to DE is the next bit of code that we were generating, and then it was putting the code back in to the destination variables. So as you can see, we never picked up the contents of C and D. In order to do that, what we're going to have to do is, in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one I prepared earlier. Let's just put this code in here. It's an awful lot of lines just to do that. Whoops. Let's go back. That's an awful lot of lines just to put in one line of code, but that's unfortunately the way it is with compilers sometimes. So we're getting the source address, making sure that it is a variable pair. So we know once we've done those two checks that we know it's a variable pair. So it converts the instruction to a double address, and then we want the code for load HL with the contents of the 2 bytes at one location. So that gets put in, and then we have to tell it which bytes we're putting in there. Well, what we got back from ints double should be in our HL pair, so we flip that into DE, and then we copy that into the code, the object code, and then we flip that back again so that the destination is back in the DE pair, which it should be, and the compiler then carries on and does the code that actually does the addition or subtraction and puts it back into the destination variables.
So now we have AGD in memory, all loaded up. So what we need to do is go to the events and run and write some code. So let's put it in the game initialization section. So let's put it into caps lock mode, shift 2. Right, first of all, I'm going to set the A and B variable pair to the first byte of the screen memory. So, oops, let A equal 0, let B equal 64. So that loads AB with the value 16384. Just take my word for it if you don't understand how 16-bit and 8-bit numbers work. Then we're going to do something similar with C and D, but what we're going to do is make C and D 2048, which is the offset to the middle third of the screen. So for that, we've got to set D to be 8. Then if we add AB to CD, that should get us the address 18432 if memory serves, and then we can just poke CD 255. We get a black line about a third of the way down the screen. So that should do what we want it to do. Let's come out of there, and then let's run it and see if we get a little black line about a third of the way down the screen. And so we do. So that's fixed our bug with add AB to CD. And nice to see that poke is working. There was an extra bug in the poke function that I had to fix that you didn't see on camera. So we'll leave it at that for this episode. Thanks for watching. Guys, like, comment, share or subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I also have a Patreon account for those who want to support new Spectrum and ZX81 software development.